So there's quite a bit of work suggesting that our current national food system, or food economy, which is a term I prefer, is dominated by an industrial and extractive model with centralized supply chains and moving food long distances, often globally. Next slide. Next slide, please. So why is that important? Can we move to the next slide? Is there some reason why we're not getting to the next slide? There we go. So why is it important? There's a lot of evidence that our current system contributes to long-term declining soil health, surface and groundwater pollution, declining food nutrition and health, direct impacts on climate change, and is accompanied by massive waste of the food that is grown. It has been shown in the book Drawdown, which looks at how to reduce and eliminate greenhouse gases, that decreasing food waste, encouraging more plant-based diets, moving to a regenerative agriculture, decreasing food miles traveled are all major opportunities to reduce our society's carbon footprint. Next slide, please. So why does it matter locally? As we saw during the COVID, that didn't get spell check, likes to blame it on the crows. During the COVID shutdowns, we saw a lot of empty shelves in the grocery store, and a lot of that had to do with breakdowns in the national system. A lot of local meat was available to people here, but the packing plants either were shut down or were maxed out to capacity. There are people waiting till February to get their animals slaughtered and packaged for sale at this time. Food insecurities among our vulnerable members were magnified. There's, as Kim will speak to, food banks are feeding a growing percentage of our population. A significant number of school-age children are relying on the schools for meals throughout the year. Higher demand for locally produced and processed food keeps money in the community longer and builds economic resilience for the community. And I guess there's that slide is, see, it's cut off from me a little bit. Local agriculture becomes more viable, hopefully, under these conditions, which means that the loss of local agricultural lands to housing and development hopefully will slow as people can survive economically on agricultural lands. So next slide, please. So what do we mean by a food system? Here's one definition coming out of a recent report. Local and regional food systems refer to place-specific clusters of agricultural producers of all kinds, farmers, ranchers, fishermen, along with consumers and institutions engaged in producing, processing, distributing, selling, and serving foods, our hospitals, our schools, our airports. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, here's a few labels I found from some local producers. I just discovered this free-range egg producer up on Birdseye Road, selling at Dan's Market. People may or may not know we have a sheep creamery in the Birdseye area that's selling at the Real Food Market, and I believe in other places around town. There's the X-Bar Farm and Ranch out in the valley on Sierra Road is at the Meadowlark Market this summer, selling meats, and then regionally, Mannix Family Beef is available in the Real Food Market, and I think other places. They're up in Helmville, fairly close by. There's many more, but this is just a sampling. Many of you know Johnson's Nursery and Gardens. At the farmers market, they've had a long-standing booth there, and you can go to their farm and buy food just direct. And as Kim will say, they are helped out by contracting with Food Share to provide fresh produce to Food Share during the summer. And this is something Kim Dale will talk about more. Next slide, please. Just another example that for Montana, local food systems can include regional, statewide, and even further regional systems, which are bringing things in, hopefully grown in a sustainable way. But here's a brief list of some things available in Helena stores. These slides will be up on our website with this recording. If you want to see how robust the local food system can look, if you go to this link that's in this slide later, you'll see that the Bozeman Winter Market has dozens of businesses on that website who are producing for local consumption in the Bozeman area. You know, it's a goal to shoot for here in Helena down the road if we can. Next slide, please. I may have left some out, but these are the locally owned stores I know and they carry varying amounts of local food. And some of the chain stores, I think we have about 8 or 9, you can often find local food in those stores as well. And to the extent we buy local food there, I think they'll buy more. And Mike is going to talk a little bit about the issues facing local producers, creating more demand for local producers. Next slide, please.
So Max, we're about 4 minutes to the 5-minute delayed time.
Okay, well, I'm about done. I wasn't sure I was going to show this slide. I don't want to get into it in detail, but backing way out again to the 30,000-foot view, one of the reasons many of us interested in this work are interested in regenerative agriculture, which can be part of a local food economy, is that, and we haven't talked a lot about what that means, regenerative agriculture, but it's basically building soil health through agricultural practices. And these bullets are all things that have been identified to benefit from a shift from our extractive agricultural model to a more regenerative model. But you can see on here, revitalizing local economies, increasing nutrient-dense foods, improving nutrition, reversing climate change. If you look at that Rodale report, there's lots of research now making the case for this shift. So with that, I think we can move into the speakers. Kim Dale I'm going to introduce Kim, and then McKenna is going to introduce Micah. And I had her stuff here. Kim is the program. Say it again, Kim. I'm sorry. I had it in front of me and I lost it. You're program manager and operations manager?
I'm the program operation director at Helena Food Share.
And how long have you been at Food Share?
Over 6 years now.
Okay. And what drew you to work there?
You know, it's been an organization that I've had a heart for probably almost since its conception. We've been donors of one kind or another, our family has. And when there was an opportunity for me to move back into the nonprofit world, it felt like a really good fit.
So I'll ask you one last question, then you can get into your presentation. So what's been the biggest surprise, that you've run into since you started working at Food Share?
Probably the diversity of the need and how far-reaching hunger is for very many of our community neighbors, and the diversity of the folks that need that service. We're a need-based operation, not an income-based operation, and that allows us to serve people when the need presents itself, not based on what their annual income is.
Well, we got your slides queued up, and I guess we can move right into Kim's slides and you can take us through them.
So some of it, there's numbers right in front of you, but I think one of the things that I've learned over the course of the last 6 years is what small part, it really is small in the big comparison of how much food moves through our community, but Helena Food Share alone does move 2.2 million pounds of food through our doors every year. And I think the most significant, what relates to us here, what we're talking about, is that 1.1 million pounds of food that comes from our local grocery stores. That means us out every day, Monday through Friday, and going to every single grocery store or food distributor around the city and picking up that food and bringing it back, sorting it, trying to make as much of that food available for human consumption before it does go to discard it to animals. And you can see the amount that we discard to animals, and it's minute in the big picture when you think about tonnage, but it's just one more way to feed. We're going to get into that in the next slide, but we have now gone on to helping with 406 recycling and Matt's efforts to try to take anything that might have been left over that was going into our dump into a compost. So we really go out of our way to try to make sure we're recycling everything and making sure that that food's getting into the hands of people and animals that need it. You can see kind of where we break down things, what we've gotten from donations from our local growers. Those purchased products that you see, the fresh local produce that we've purchased, it's pretty much about $1 a pound that we're paying on average. So it's close to almost 30,000 pounds, well, 26,000 pounds and about $30,000 that we spent last year on our local, putting into our local system. And that effort had certainly begun before my time coming to Helena Food Share, but just in its infancy. And in the last 6 years, I've seen so much change and will in the community to really help change the diet of the people that are the most vulnerable in our community. I think that COVID-19 has proven to us that diets matter, food matters, and your overall health really matters, and food and the quality of food is essential to make good life choices for the most vulnerable. That affects a lot of us when it comes to healthcare systems. So we can go on to the next slide. And that's about what we recycle, we try to do everything we can to make sure that we're playing a vital role in doing what we can do best. And we have a little bit of an advantage over the industrial grocery stores in our city because we are a small nonprofit, and we try to listen to our donors and do their will, basically. And we are hearing from our donors that recycling and making sure that we're not wasting anything is critical to our ongoing operations. Next slide, please. When I talk about improving the nutritional quality of the food, we've had reach outs, and we're starting strong partnerships, not with only just St. Peter's Health, but Blue Cross Blue Shield. I talked a little bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, about the Charlie Cart project, which is a national project that the city of Helena gave us money to buy this cart, and we were using it prior to COVID-19, mostly as a food demo in our own store, so that our customers could have an opportunity to be able to see what you can do with all this fresh local product. And when we first really started bringing in fresh local product, probably 4 years ago, I'll have to say that there was namesayers that said that our folks would never take that. They wouldn't know what to do with it. And I can't tell you the amount of pride that we've had at Helena Food Share in the last few years. There was often times in the middle of summer when the harvest was plenty and the farmers were bringing in their stuff that you couldn't have come to a higher quality food market, because pretty much some of that was getting picked that day and was already in people's hands that evening. And we believe that the Charlie Cart and other little things that we've done to increase that, including Harvest of the Month, working with the Harvest of the Month folks, has helped give us the tools to help our customers feel differently about product they might not have known about or know how to use. Those are all the things that we've been able to purchase here locally. And that's not exhausted. There certainly is some more things that we could have added. But I think that really gives us, in this particular, with Resilient Helena, all those things that were able to be grown right here in our own backyard, so to speak. And I wish there was a really hard definition of local and regional and state, but here in Helena Food Share, we use the word hyper-local, meaning our valley, local, meaning all the way up to our friends at the Elk Creek Colony, and then more than we go state, and think about it that way, and then regional. Some of the big, I kind of want to highlight just for a minute that the Kamala offer that comes out of Big Sandy that goes into our Kids Pack project. And I think I feel really great about that, of just at least having one local processed item in our Kids Packs that we send out every weekend to the kids. Next slide. So I talked about what we were just talking about with the St. Peter's Health and the Charlie Cart project. St. Peter's has really helped us with that yearly donation that really got us started. They give us $20,000 a year to buy those local products. And then we've also put in about $10,000 from our own coffers. And we're trying to increase that amount every year. This year's gonna have some challenges, and we can talk about those at another, maybe later in the evening, but a lot of our local markets really have been used in a way this year that they haven't been used before. And we don't sign hard contracts with any of our farmers. We're not wanting anybody to feel the pressure that they would have to owe us something if they can't produce. So if they have an opportunity to sell their product in a different market, we don't want to deny them at Helena Food Share of that opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about the food pantries. I'm going to jump back for just a minute, but you don't need to go back. Alongside of us, Missoula Food Bank and also Montana Food Bank in the last few years have been doing much different of catching product. Brent over at Montana Food Bank Network has been bringing so much more fresh product into our coffers into the state and bringing in truckloads. And so there's more fresh product available to us in the last 3 years that they've brought in that comes more from a regional, that Idaho, Washington, Oregon. And that plays a big role in what we're being able to offer our customers as well. Next slide. I know my time's running out, so I want to talk briefly about the shared kitchen, and maybe Michael will talk about it too, but this has been a dream that people around our part of the world have been talking about for a long time. And it's because there is such a need, and there's other places in the state have taken advantage of this shared kitchen where local farmers have one more opportunity not to have such a short growing season and can turn their product into something that can be used during our long winter months. And that we can get, I feel like that's almost a conversation in and of itself that can help with the processing of food. We've met so many obstacles with COVID-19, with meat processing, and all kinds of challenges of being able to keep more local food available for all of us. And a commercial kitchen is one idea I think that really has a lot of deep roots that could help a lot of people. And then just quickly, that federal program, that Farmers to Family Food Box program, was basically your tax dollars coming in a perishable produce box once a week for the last 4 months. We're having trouble getting that program reinstated. The contracts didn't get signed for the last 2 months, and they got signed late, so we don't think that there potentially might not be any more of those produce boxes, and we were dealing with about 40,000 pounds of food each week for 4 months. So there's my timer for 10 minutes. So is there another slide? Nope, great. Thank you.
I think we're running ahead a bit. So I think if you want a few minutes to wrap up, Kim, I think you can do that.
Well, I guess I want to say just in the last couple minutes is that I really appreciate the opportunity for you guys wanting to hear about Helena Food Share and what our efforts really trying to work with the community and with our local farmers and our local agriculture and to expand the products that can be grown. I feel like one small thing that Helena Food Share can do is give opportunity to some smaller farmers. I've been trying to cherry pick farmers that have been coming in with larger donations and offering them an opportunity to make money off of that. They don't need to be consistent, but you know, if somebody's bringing in 500 pounds of squash, we might have an opportunity to pay you next year if you might be willing to try your hand at being part of more of a aggressive agricultural. I think it's important to us to understand how many pounds of food can we actually get off the land that's in our hyper local area, and start trying to evaluate that even more on a local level and then state level ultimately, right? How much food can we produce and what kind of food it is? There's a part that wanted to challenge all of us at the beginning of this when we're talking about food. What do we need versus what do we want when it comes to food? Because I think in that question is really lies a lot of variables that we all have to address in our own diets. And again, this time that we're in has really given us an opportunity to reevaluate what our priorities are, and food needs to be shared equally. I think that's an important message that we all need to think about, and what does that mean for all of us? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kim. McKenna, do you want to introduce Micah?
Yes, I'd love to. Let me just get myself off mute here. So Micah has a wonderful bio that I would love to share some snippets of with you all before she gets into her presentation. So Micah Eller is the Director of Sales for Big Sky Hospitality Group. She's born in Helena and started her hospitality career bussing tables and running takeout for her family's restaurant, the No Sweat Cafe. Her career includes working the competitive kitchens of the Girl and the Goat in Chicago, and as an executive chef and general manager for the original Montana Club, where she ushered in the new age of starting the Rathskeller Pub and the cooperative structure that the Montana Club has today. Other projects Micah has worked on is a grant-funded culinary education project, the East Helena Food and Culture Hub, where she taught cooking skills to students of all ages. She also created and directs the Montana Meadowlark Music Festival here in Helena. It was there that she became acquainted with some of the folks of Big Sky Hospitality and joined their team as Director of Sales, Catering, and Events. Micah has a passion for locally grown food and well-organized events. And I think that rings true through everything that Micah does in the Helena community. In her free time, she loves to garden, raise chickens, make cheese. I've been tracking her progress on making soaps. So follow Micah on Facebook if you want to know about soap and lard and all of those cool things. She likes to pickle and can, bake gluten-free treats, play music, and spend time with her partner, Matt, and her dog, Quinn. Thank you for being here with us, Micah.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, the soap making thing has been mostly a COVID development, I think. Need to have something to fill the time. One of the other things that I've been working on lately is the Meadowlark Farmers Market as well, which McKenna actually volunteered with us last week. And that has been something that I kind of want to talk about in my presentation as well. So I spent a lot of time in the kitchens, obviously, but I've moved on to more of the events and sales position. I still have ties to the culinary industry and always want to improve it because Helena has come a long way with the culinary industry. I left here because I didn't feel like I could learn anything else, but I see a lot of changes in Helena. Restaurant skills wise, but also resiliency wise that I'm really excited about. So my experience with Helena's food systems, it suggests many of those elements of resiliency, especially like Helena Food Share. It's such a cornerstone of our community. However, cultural and business barriers, they do exist that can hamper that resilience. And I kind of wanted to talk about those and some of the solutions that we can come up with to combat that. So I don't know, I gave Max a couple different ideas for slides, but they might be completely out of whack to what I'm talking about right now. So please don't take those too seriously there. So I realized that when I sent him this, I talked a lot about roadblocks and obstacles, but I really want to talk about what we already have in place for a resilient food system in Helena. A resilient food system has coordinated social and business elements to ensure the ability to adapt to threats and changes in the environment. Helena matches this with community leadership. There's an increasing amount of young chefs who are using local food and other products in their respective restaurants. We're getting better about decreasing waste. 406 Recycling has just recently started their commercial composting company, which I'm super excited about because we use all compostable cups at our music festival. And I want to see a decrease in waste just in general in our homes, our events, and our businesses. Training programs, there are better culinary programs in our schools. There's some really great culinary teachers out there now, including the brand new commercial kitchen in the East Helena High School, which is training young people on restaurant style cooking as opposed to homemaking and being a wife. For infrastructure, Helena has the fairgrounds, which has an event space and a community kitchen. Plus there, unfortunately, are some more vacant kitchens coming about because of COVID that could provide some opportunities for the future. Helena could use improvement in cohesive structure and training for existing structures so that they know how to adapt to some of those environmental changes. The Helena Farmers Market was unable to adapt to COVID, which created a significant threat to the existence of local farmers. And that's why we started the Meadowlark Farmers Market, because there were so many farmers that had invested all of these funds into the growing season and had a month-long gap where they couldn't necessarily bring that product to market. Plus, there's other things with a farmer's market that make it a little bit more tenuous, like when it was crazy raining the other day, or the fact that we can only have 250 people walk through. Lack of infrastructure and environmental roadblocks, a limited growing season without widespread indoor growing or storage processing facilities, kind of like what Kim was talking about, that commercial kitchen. Community leadership, lack of professional culinary training opportunities besides those ones in the high school. In Portland, there was an active academic cooking society. Everyone played off of everyone else and learned to use locally grown food. In the culinary school that I went to, which was a primary training facility for cooks, the primary lesson was to learn how to learn. So everybody had this widespread mindset that created a cohesive, collaborative culinary environment in Portland. And sometimes there's a lack of community buy-in. There's a negative perception by some on local food that it's too expensive, that's too bourgeois, or too out of reach for the common person. So potential solutions, I think we can move on to the next slide there, is to create cohesive networks. We already have a great amount of nonprofits and other community partners that are active in specific or overlapping parts of the food system. They could potentially work together to utilize those resources and education and harness a comprehensive plan. County level leadership and citywide participation. The fairgrounds hosts an excellent space for startups and events, but it can be cost prohibitive for somebody wanting to do a pop-up restaurant. A solution would be to put a young food-minded person on the fairgrounds board. A Why Local campaign. This is something we spoke about in No Kid Hungry. Buy local doesn't explain why you should support local systems or who your dollars are going to, the increased quality of the food you will be receiving, or how many food miles you save by not trucking it across the country, but a targeted campaign explaining the why could be effective. A farm cooperative or restaurant group, bringing like-minded individuals together to cut out the high food mile middleman. A cohesive group could pursue education and infrastructure grants, as well as form a low mile middleman for local producers and buyers. That middleman could assure availability and quality for buyers. Cooperative structures could create buyer clubs, local food aggregators, and value-added products and purchases. That's similar to the Yellowstone Food Hub in Billings. And that's something that we kind of pursued with the East Helena Food and Culture Hub, but it was difficult because that was a planning grant and not necessarily the structure that someone would need to move forward with that cooperative. In the same way that FoodShare creates baseline sales to farmers, these aggregators of value-added producers could add to that baseline and create a more resilient farmer just in general. It creates more predictable sales volumes for farmers, especially when large commercial food production organizations like military kitchens, hospitals, schools are incorporated. But Helena is consistently improving its local food resiliency. We can bring down barriers by creating the Why Local campaign, ensure local leadership is aware of food resilience issues, and foster the creation of a buyer and seller cooperative. So that's basically all of those different organizations right there that potentially could work together. I know a ton of them already do work together. Yeah, those are solutions that we kind of came up with in the East Helena Food and Culture Hub, but it would be something that each of us could pursue. And I know I'm probably a little short on time, but.
That was great. Thanks, Mike. A lot there. I got to go back to the recording and take notes. It's pretty rich. And I should say that one of the things we're hoping to come out of this is people interested in getting together and exploring how to take these ideas forward, or finding out where to plug into things that are already happening. So, Mark, I didn't ask you this ahead of time. Do you want to introduce Robin?
Sure, Max. Robin Kelson is the interim executive director at Arrow. She has a great deal of experience with local food and local seeds. She has her own seed company up in the Flathead. She has been on the board of Arrow since 2016, and then has become, at the beginning of the year, became the interim ED, where she works with Lindsay Ganong on program and development for Arrow. And she's a good friend. And so we're just very pleased to have her joining us tonight.
Great. Do I start talking now? Hi, everyone. Can I have my first slide? So I just, Max reached out to me and asked me to just kind of talk about our thoughts from the Arrow perspective about food systems. And I just have some brief comments on this, because to kind of scope it up to maybe the 30,000 foot level. And just to say some things to think about. So keys for successful food systems really is understanding that they are systems. And just like any system on the planet, you know, any ecosystem, whether it's the forest, the wetlands, the microbiome in our guts, whatever, all systems have inputs and outputs. And the more local and renewable the inputs, the more sustainable the system. And lastly, that resilient systems are sustainable systems. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So if we take the concept, if we just think about, say, a farm and what it takes for the farm to grow food every year, they have inputs. So the farmer needs seeds to plant, fertilizer for the soil, fuel to run the tractor, and probably electricity to power the pump that's going to pull up the water from the well. So if our farmer saves her own seeds, makes her own compost from her manures and biomass on her farm, grows the plants that make the biofuel that runs her tractor, and uses solar or wind to power the pump that runs her water well, she has local renewable inputs, and her system's pretty sustainable, obviously, right? So why is that important? So as we all know, resiliency is key and becoming ever more these days, because resiliency, the definition of resiliency that we're working with is the ability to accommodate disruptive change. And disruptive change, of course, is high impact and low predictability. COVID is a perfect example of that. So can I have the next slide? So with that in mind, that concept of systems and sustainable systems and the need to have the inputs local and renewable for the system to be sustainable. The slide on the left, the graphic on the left is a fairly common representation of the way food systems are often described. And even though this is cited as the interconnected elements of a community-based food system, this would apply to any food system, whether it was, you know, a commodity system or not. It's basically food comes from those who produce it. There's a step of processing it. There's the step of distributing it to where it needs to go. There's the consumption, and then there's the recovery of any waste. And in some graphics, the consumption is split up into food access. So where one gets access to the food, that would be your retailers, your grocers, your restaurants, your food hubs, your pantries, etc. And then the consumer being the people who actually eat the food. This graphic that we have here just has those 5 elements. And Arrow in its history, and forgive me for those of you who have been with me, these are my only 2 slides, so I'm just gonna stay here and I'll finish up. Arrow, for probably 35 years of its history, spent most of its time helping to build the pillars or sectors of this graphic that relate primarily to production, processing, distribution, and consumption, starting first with really supporting our farmers and becoming experts in sustainable agriculture production, and then learning how to apply value-added products to their system to help make them more sustainable, and then learn how to distribute it and build up the distribution so we can get more of that local food across the state of Montana, and helping teach people about the concept of the value of local food. And as a result of all that work over the last 30 some odd years, there's just this whole network of organizations and the work of both the people at Arrow and others that they connected with in developing this extraordinary resource, as demonstrated by both Kim and Micah with their communications. So that work is really quite strong. It's quite established in the state of Montana. And so about 7 or 10 years ago, Arrow started to look at, well, where should it put its focus next? And about 3 years ago, we started a project called Montana Food Economy Initiative, which we're just calling MFEI. And the question was asked in different regions of the state to ask the local communities to look at the state of their local food systems. How are they doing? And what we found, at least in the regions that we looked at and the communities that reported back, was that these different sectors of the system were not actually spending a lot of time talking to each other. And each one of those sectors has its own inputs and outputs, and that actually there are, just as Kim and both Kim and Micah described in their examples, there are outputs in various different parts that if you know who could use them as an input, you can actually help establish and enhance the system's processes. So Kim, for example, was talking in Helena Share about they're going to grocery stores and finding produce that the grocery store is no longer using. That's an output that would normally go to, maybe it would just go to the landfill once upon a time. Helena Shares instead finds homes for that food, and then any food that they don't provide for consumption, they provide to waste recovery, in this case to animals. So that's an incredible example. And so, Micah.
So Robin,
Yes.
we're about 2 minutes over. Just
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm done.
Oh,
We're helping to develop this. We're helping to develop a program. We're working on a program now that is intended to help connect and expand these relationships and also bring the consumer to the table. Because the other thing we discovered was that consumers view themselves as separate from the food system. Everybody else is involved, but that the consumer who actually eats is not part of the system. And the reality is if you eat, you're in. That speaks to this concept that Micah was talking about of why local food. So helping to educate them. And we're doing that through this MFEI program, which is basically a next level take on the farm improvement clubs of the 1990s that Arrow did. And I'll be complete here.
Thanks, Robin. So I apologize. I think I forgot that the times on our agenda are when we're finishing up each section. We were going to take some time to let people who are on the call introduce themselves and mention what they're about. And I don't know everybody who's here, but there's a few I'm going to call on that I've warned them, and there's a few I haven't warned that I know are working around these issues we've been talking about. And the first person I'd like to call on is Gerald Schaefer. Gerald is teaching at Carroll College, and he's also a farmer. And I think for a while, he had a CSA. I think he could talk about that briefly, but he has some ideas about getting his students more involved in food issues. Gerald, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I recognize a few faces and some new ones. As Max said, I'm a teacher at Carroll College in our health sciences department, and I teach a course in community nutrition. I also started a course 3 years ago called Gardening and Community Health, where we've gone up to Chaudière and worked with the kids there. Also planning to plant some garlic at Helena Food Shares Garden this fall. And as Max also mentioned, my wife and Tanya and I ran, we called it Moonrise Garden CSA, which was the successor to the North Valley Co-op CSA with Gay Iman, Lorna Milne, and Cindy Hansen. We did that for a couple of years. We did not do it this past year. We had 15 to 20 CSA subscribers, so quite small. Just my wife and I ran it as a summer project. We did not continue with it this year, and I'm not sure if we're going to. Sometimes we think we should, and other times we think, why bother? So we live in town and have a decent sized garden at Lorna Milne and John Mogul's property in the valley, and they've been supportive of our efforts, and we lease land from them. I've talked with Max and also with Kim Dale. A longer term goal I have, and some of you might be interested in being involved, it's still at the very preliminary planning processes, would be to have a garden, a farm at Our Redeemer's Lutheran Church. They have a lot of land there. Last summer, my wife and I visited the Peas Farm in Missoula and were very much inspired. And I remember when I first came to Helena about 7 years ago, some people were saying, oh, we need a peas farm in Helena. It hasn't happened, but I'd like to make it happen, to start at least at a smaller, more modest level and see where it could go. So still thinking on that, and hope to maybe get together a planning group or people who might be interested this fall and nail down some specifics. So those are some things I'm involved in. Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Gerald. Well, there's a few people that weren't able to be here today, but I see that Kim Lloyd's here, and Kim's worked in these areas for a while. No warning here, Kim, but are you willing to talk a little bit about your perspective on local food, what you've been up to?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Max, for putting me on the spot. It's really good to see some familiar names on here and some new ones as well. And especially to hear about what is still going on in Helena with the local food systems. I spent a long time working with the community gardens. I've also been an intern at the Peas Farm up in Missoula for a while, and would really like to see the local food movement continue in Helena. I currently work for the state in the school nutrition office and run an emergency food program, and the local food topic has come up a lot. And so, but I'm still in Helena, and although I have a statewide focus for my career, I do have a local focus in my personal life, and would love to continue to stay involved with whatever projects are coming down the pipe for Helena. I think there are a lot of exciting opportunities, and I'm really glad to hear that there's a lot of partnerships happening, and that there's still energy behind this movement, as I haven't really been involved with it for a couple of years. I would really like to get back on board with things. So thanks, Max.
I was hoping Ann Wakeman could be here, but she wasn't able to be. Micah, could you say a little bit about what's going on with the No Kids Hunger group? I hear it's still active.
You know, I'm actually not in the group anymore since I moved on from East Helena Food and Culture Hub, but I believe that they are still active. I still get the meeting invites, so and I see the agenda still going on. But Kim Dale is part of that.
Max, I'm in Helena Food Shares.
Yeah.
So what is this something that people could plug into, or what's the focus there?
No Kids Hunger Coalition for Lewis and Clark County is, we have been on a little bit of a reprieve because all the people currently on the board, there's 5 of us on the lead team, all have pretty much jobs that have changed drastically in the last few months for direct service. So we're reconvening, and our real focus, a couple big things that we've really been focusing on is getting higher nutrition into the quality of the foods served at our schools in the Helena area. So that was a big focus, really trying to help kids get anybody who is eligible for free lunches, get more kids signed up with that. We were working with St. Peter's Hospital to increase breastfeeding. That's another thing that we've been working on and have our hands in that. And mostly just really trying to work on higher quality nutrition for our kids and getting good food into our kids' bellies here in Helena.
Well, there's a number of people I don't know on the call. If there's someone would like to introduce themselves, that's actively doing something that would, contribute to what we're talking about tonight, please raise your hand and jump in.
And we're hoping to finish this session at 7:55 to get back on track.
Okay, so we have a minute or two. So.
Max, I could pitch in a couple things about Northern Plains Sleeping Giant.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
Please.
So Northern Plains is a grassroots conservation and family agriculture group that is statewide. So we also focus on a lot of the local food issues. You might have heard of the Montana Local Food Challenge. That's something that we host. It's 5 years and counting. It happens during the month of August. The premise is simple. We ask people to sign up and commit to eating something local every day. But from there, you can sign up for the additional challenges, like talk to a producer at the farmer's market and ask them about barriers to getting local food into our restaurants or food systems, and try out a new recipe with a product that is grown in Montana that you've never tried before. So all of those are really fun. Sleeping Giant Citizens Council is the local affiliate of Northern Plains in Helena, and they've just committed. I know there's a number of SGCC members here on the call, which is awesome. They've just decided to commit to opening up their local food committee again. They are looking for direction to pretty much complement and support all of the good work that is already happening. But if there are good ideas that need to be put to work, I think Sleeping Giant is open to hearing those ideas. We've done a lot on farm to school on a statewide level, but most of that focus has been in Eastern Montana schools, because that's where some of our statewide efforts have been. A couple other things, just so you all know what's going on. Tonight, if you're looking for something fun, one of the projects Sleeping Giant Citizens Council worked on is a farm to school, wow, excuse me, it's been a day. Not farm to school at all. It's the farm to table online auction. So if you're interested in doing a dinner for 4 to 6 of your friends with locally sourced cuisine with someone like Chef Micah or James Richmond or other chefs in Helena, you can go online and bid on those, and it supports, our local food economy in some good ways. So that's all I'll say. Thanks.
I do see one more face here that I'll put on the spot briefly if he wants to. Jim Barngrover has been involved in growing food here for a long time. And Jim, I don't know if there's something that you haven't heard yet you'd like to throw into the mix here from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Max. I guess when I was on staff with Arrow as a food systems coordinator 12, 14 years ago, we did have some people meet and conversations about developing a community farm, which really didn't go anywhere. It was quite an aspiration, but maybe more than just a simple garden or a couple acres of produce, but integrated livestock and raising on a larger scale. And that would have been quite an ambitious project and a difficult one to do at that time. I think there's a lot more awareness now about the importance or potential of that, or a combination of bringing together more local producers to serve our community with local foods. I'm not certain I'm adding anything to the conversation. I guess on a personal level, I've been working with community gardens for 30 years and was a part of the original board that developed Helena Community Gardens, and that's been a success story. I think it could expand and improve, but that's one of the things that I think has been quite integral to raising awareness in the community. We have a long ways to go. I think that's all I'd have to say.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Okay. McKenna, you want to get us going into our breakouts then?
Great. Okay, and if I could ask Diana to pull up our slides again. So we're going to spend 15 minutes processing some of what we heard and also generating some ideas in groups of about 4 to 5 people. So for those,
McKenna, can you give me permission to share my screen again? Sorry.
I can do that. Just gotta get to the right view. There we go. You should have access now. So we've set up groups to break out for 15 minutes, and we have 3 prompting questions. If you have one volunteer who would be willing to take notes and report out at the end of our talk, I think that assigning out that volunteer early would be great. Okay, so the 3 questions are: what parts of the Helena local food system do you currently interact with? Where do you identify gaps in the Helena food system that we could improve upon for local food access? And how can we start closing in on those gaps? So I know some of those are high and lofty questions. We're not expecting grandiose answers, but the purpose of this meeting is to get the conversation started with those who are interested and who want to talk through these issues together. So at this point, I'd stop. Are there any questions about what we have tasked of everyone here? All right, thanks for being with us, Micah. We've got her email in the chat. Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and open up the rooms. I think you have to opt in and click, say, join breakout room XYZ, and you'll have 15 minutes to do this. All right. Oh, hey, you troublemakers.
Oh, boy.
Question. So I had a few other people assigned to your group, but when we did the small groups, everybody abandoned ship. There's a bunch of people who just dropped off the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
So do you want to be moved into a bigger group? 'Cause I can do.
I'm okay in a small group.
It might be better to have more interaction with other folks.
Okay. Well, it's easy for me to switch that up. Okay, so I'm going to leave your room, and you might be surprised by
Okay. Who
next
joins us? Yay.
question, right?
Have so much energy about with having the sort of closed system with our restaurants, with knowing that restaurants produce a lot of food waste, and how can we like harvest that to then put back into our community with like local farmers being able to use the composting for, you know, for fertilization, and just keep having this, you know, this closed loop of our food cycle. But yeah.
Yeah, well, Kim's with us in this group, so
Oh, awesome.
yeah.
Let me slide it so I can see everyone. Hi.
We're kind of heavy with people that worked on this meeting tonight. So That's a great idea. I don't know, Kim, what, I know you've talked a lot about getting the food from the restaurants. What about from from the grocery stores? What about from the restaurants? Is that happening too?
I think the restaurants is another challenge, and some other food pantries do harvest from restaurants, but that's a lot about keeping food. That's where that commercial kitchen becomes critical, of changing that restaurant food into a product that then can come onto a grocery shelf. God's Love takes a lot of restaurant food because they can serve it instantly and they're not trying to repurpose it. So we have not gotten our hands into the restaurant. We don't have the facility right now to even begin to take that project on.
Yeah. No, it's probably like a ways in the future, but like if I could be part of that one day, I would.
But Jessica, you really talked about what Matt's bringing to the table here in Helena. He's offering, and I don't know what his capacity is, everything can get composted on a pretty high scale level, and even including dairy and meat products, and that's almost unheard of. So I think that there's lots to be pursued with that, with Matt and his ability, his capacity.
Yeah, and I've known Matt since I first met him when I was in high school because of the Save Mobile, and I did volunteer work with that and then helped start the recycling program at Capitol High all the way back in 2007.
Cool.
And I currently compost myself. I do bokashi is what it's called. I need to find a different way to compost, but it has been something from my own experience of composting my own food and realizing how much waste there is, and knowing that like, well, I'm one individual person, look at like the systems that create food, like that's a lot more waste. So yeah, I should reach out to Matt and see what he's got in the books.
So I'm late to this group. Have you decided who's taking notes?
I'm willing to take notes.
Okay.
I can. I have a pen. I'm writing down people's names.
Okay, great, Jessica. So I've heard one gap, which is restaurant food waste, and I've heard one solution, which is 406 recycling composting program.
There we go.
Ready.
To add to that, we had a tour of the landfill with the Helena Citizens Conservation Board last week, and they're doing a tremendous amount of composting there. And I think that there are folks who, and mostly that's just grass clippings and tree waste that's been ground up. And they add biosolids to that as well. And they get some pretty high quality compost as a result. There is interest among members of the board in picking up food waste and having the city pick up food waste. It's probably a long journey to get to that point, but that may be a solution.
Yeah.
Mark, do you know where the compost is going?
Apparently there is a company, and I can't remember the name of it, that is screening the compost, and they get half of it as a result for doing that. And then they sell that individually. And then the city's remaining half, I think they're using on parks, city parks, on roadway construction projects and things like that.
Great, cool.
I know that so long ago as well, I volunteered at Food Share again when I was like 17. And that's when I first learned about, like, again, grocery store waste. And so I'm happy to hear that there is that partnership with at least the local grocery stores to be like, well, this is the shelf life is nearing it, or like this apple is bruised, like we can't sell it. Is that for some of the like chain grocery stores as well, or just the locally owned ones?
No, it's locally as well as every single grocery store in our region, including like Target and IGA out in East Helena. There's a big, huge corporation called Feeding America, and all of your larger grocery store chains I report to Feeding America. We're part of Feeding America. And so that's the umbrella organization nationally that has ties to all kinds of major grocery stores that are part of that rescuing food. And it's a big tax write-off for those pounds that are donated.
That's really interesting to know that.
Yeah.
You know, I've been, a couple things I've been interested in. I don't think you can find out because of the proprietary side, but I'd love to know how much food goes through Helena, through all the different grocery stores. It'd be very interesting. And, I'm guessing in places that have robust local food systems that some of the grocery stores, to stay competitive, have to start buying locally. But in Helena, I've often wondered how, habits get changed to where people, if you're looking at 2 eggs on the shelf and what's the mind change that says, I'm going to buy the local ones. I recently did that at Vans when I realized that picture we showed of the people up on Birdseye that are USDA organic feed to their chickens. And the feed they're using was a company started by friends of mine that is now being sold out of a place in Fort Benton. And I had no idea about that producer here in Helena. And I'd like to see, as a solution, a website that posted all the people that are part of the local food system, all the producers, and what their practices are. That'd be one of the, I'd list that in the solution column so that there's more visibility. I'd like to see people walk into the store and challenge themselves to buy, if they have a chance to buy local first. And if there's a financial difference, to really think about it in terms of their whole food budget and not just, oh, it's $1 cheaper to buy these eggs. Well, what are you doing to buy the local eggs?
Yeah.
How much
Some sort of graph that has like the equivalence of, the miles that had to be traveled and like the carbon footprint offset or something. Yeah. And like, here's a picture of the farmers that you're supporting.
Yeah, more producer to consumer access, whether it's a get to know you event or somehow building that capacity, because producers are pretty strapped to keep their business together, let alone do all the extra, come to webinars like this, or go the extra mile to get their social media put together. So if we can think of ways to amplify those stories without asking them to do more work, that would be stellar. Yeah. One thing that's come to mind in Sleeping Giant that I want to make sure gets on our list is one barrier for just like local production as far as community gardens or backyard gardens goes is there's a lot of folks who just were never raised with the knowledge of how to grow food. And so having these master gardener mentorship programs is something I've heard, I think from 6th Ward and maybe from the Community Gardens Board. But I think that's a fun one we could explore as a community.
We do have that here in Helena, right? We do have master.
So, but how big is it? Kim, you might know.
It sells out every time, and it's the county extension, and I think the classes get full before that time comes, and then you get a certificate. I think there's 3 levels, masters 1, 2, and then maybe even 3, but for sure that master one has a big, especially when Brent was there. So, and I think that's still the case.
I did want to mention another resource for finding local food. Arrow has a tool called Abundant Montana. You can go to the arrowmt.org website and find that link. And it shows you can search for local producers, farmers markets, all sorts of local resources.
Thanks, Mark. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. That should be highlighted.
I also want to bring up an idea that we've heard, and I had some involvement when we lived in Houston with a food policy work group, and the idea with that was that eventually it would lead to a food policy council. It never did, but a food policy council would have a link to local government and perhaps be able to implement policy proposals that would actually help promote local food, make it easier for local farmers and producers, processors, and so on to operate. So that may be something we'd want to consider and see if there's any interest in that.
I just wanted to highlight two things that everybody should know about our local city government. You know, not only did they back the 6th Ward Garden coming into existence and taking that on, you know, the fact that they've helped Helena Food Share with our Charlie cart purchase that so that we can make a difference. And then also they've helped us with paying for the processing of the city game that's called every year. So there's already monies that that entity has put on the table to help those kinds of efforts.
Hey. This is all like really awesome and helpful information coming from someone who has no background or experience in this. I do like the idea of doing master gardening or knowing that those exist, but making them more accessible or offering them multiple times a year. Or I don't know if there's like scholarship programs for people who are lower income to be able to access those, or have like priority for people who are coming from like these underserved populations or communities to be able to access those first over other people who are like, I want to be a master gardener.
Or something in between master gardener and like functional gardener certification.
Yeah. Like, let's start with an herb garden. Like, let's just keep your basil alive. Something I only learned.
Drifting back.
Okay. Yeah, so we can ask McKenna for help with some of that. When Max says that his people aren't back yet.
No,
Back now, it's because
they're trickling in.
I think we've got everyone back.
What did I do?
We've got everybody back.
Oh, phew.
Yep. Well, how did the small groups go, everyone? Let's start. We'll go straight into reports because I want to get everyone out of here by 8:30. Hi, dog. Let's start Cheyenne's group. If you have someone ready to share what you all talked about, we'd love to hear it.
So I'm the reporter for that group. And I will share that there were a good number of discussions about how we're contributing in the community, going to buy groceries, going to restaurants, and all the things that you would expect as touch points in the community. Then I'll go to the gaps, which is the super interesting part. There is an acknowledgement that it's kind of hard to figure out how and where to find local foods. And maybe if you don't know those things and you live a little bit farther out than close into Helena, you might not, and you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, you might not buy those local foods because you might just go, I don't really know what to buy. That's the first thing. So awareness of how and where to buy local foods. The second item is infrastructure is at capacity or non-existent in a lot of our spaces for meat processing, for cleaning and packaging, and those are gaps. And then the third item that was noted is we have a really short growing season, and there is opportunity to consider other solutions such as geothermal greenhouses or other sorts of things like that. Solutions would be kind of the flip of those things. We could talk about pricing as a solution to the awareness of the local, how to find local foods and where to find local foods, and maybe the value that you're getting by buying local, high nutrition content foods. And we could consider involvement in legislative activities related to that, and then consider how to move forward with these gaps in the food production spaces. I'll hand it back to you, McKenna.
Thank you, Kathy. Great report out. And so I didn't give as clear directions as I probably could have. We're hoping to hear 2 gaps or barriers and then 2 solutions, which Kathy did beautifully. And if you're really itching to share some of those other ideas, we'd love to have you put them in the chat. John Brown did an excellent job of demonstrating that, because the Soil Summit from Northern Plains is a week from today. Registration is free, and we have some big hitter names in the soil health world, and I'll put the registration in the chat also. All right, let's hear from, let's see, Gerald and Ellie and Robin's group. Can we hear from you?
I'll say a few words. We talked about the fact that locally, and at least in the Helena Valley, there aren't that many growers, and I personally know quite a few that in the past 7 years have tried and are no longer growing for various reasons. Jim Barngrover mentioned some of the challenges in the valley as far as zoning, access to water is an issue, and of course the whole issue of zoning right now is hot and heavy in the valley. But it seems like at a community, at a county level, this community hasn't taken the steps to promote local agriculture and even to protect the land and the water that we have that could and should be used. And we weren't terribly effective, I don't think, as far as coming up with solutions for dealing with some of those issues. But yeah, it's a real challenge, and I guess what I personally would like to know more about as far as how some of the other communities, Missoula, for example, how they have succeeded, and we haven't. Not that we need to be on the same time scale as them. A lag for Helena is understandable, but it seems like we're still sort of spinning our wheels in many of these areas. So we did not come up with any good solutions, at least that I detected.
Thank you, Gerald. Definitely good things. Kathy is capturing notes of everything that is said here. And if you're interested in getting those notes, you could drop a good contact email for you in the chat if you would like to keep this conversation going. Last but not least, let's hear from Jessica for the group 3.
All right, hi. So we had a similar point about the whole awareness of how and where to find local food, and for people to or people not knowing what really the true value is. And Arrow apparently has on their website, Abundant Montana, I think is the section, to help find local producers and places that sell local food. So that is a solution to that of it, or there's a thing that already exists, but getting that information out to the public and potentially helping local producers, help featuring them, so that way people see their farmers, they know their farmers, they see these are the people that when I am buying their food, I'm supporting them and the people that they employ and their families, etc. Another gap or some sort of access point that we saw had to do with people who are unaware of or have never been exposed to how to be gardeners or grow their own food in their own yards or at a community garden. And there are master gardener programs that already exist, but they tend to fill up really fast. And so in being able to offer more of those and make them more accessible, especially to lower income people or people who are, you know, not even a master gardener class, as McKenna said, but like a mid-level like gardening class is another solution to that of, you know, with like donors or community grants or something like that that could help pay for more of these courses to make them available to more people. And then we also talked about composting, if we have time to mention that. Of one day, hopefully, we'll be able to take food waste from restaurants all over town to be able to do just kind of closed loop of our restaurants, hopefully sourcing more locally, but then having the compost from food waste be able to go and then turn it into fertilizer and go to local farms. That's the dream.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. Well, thank you everyone for sharing your ideas about this stuff. I think getting together and talking and seeing the trends gets me really excited. You know, it's very satisfying to hear that we've all been identifying fairly similar barriers and how to solve them. So thank you all for going through that exercise. And Max, do you want to take us out? You're on mute, so you'll have to unmute yourself. While Max is unmuting himself, I do want to make a shameless plug for joining some of the local groups that are doing local food work in Helena. You know, a lot of them are either nonprofits or membership based. So join Arrow as a member, donate to Helena Food Share, become a member of Sleeping Giant Citizens Council if you want to keep this stuff going.
Okay, so so this kind of going back to the big picture, you know, soil is pretty basic, and this really wonderful book that I quoted here in the bottom, this quote goes back to 1500 BC. Upon this handful of soil, our survival depends. Husband it, and it will grow our food, our fuel, our shelter, surround us with beauty. Abuse it, and the soil will collapse and die, taking humanity with it. So that insight is an old insight, and we seem to be really pushing that limit these days in our global culture. And then not so long ago, but in my grandparents' day, Aldo Leopold wrote, "We abuse land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." And I guess my hope is that a local food economy would grow out of that kind of sense of our community being beyond the human community to the land that supports us. And hopefully those are inspiring quotes. Thanks everybody for spending time with us.
Thank
so follow
you.
up. So with the few minutes we have left, so we will be putting this up on the website, and we hope to convene people who are interested in taking this conversation forward. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to happen, but it is a hope we have.
Well, I would just reiterate what McKenna said. If you're interested in keeping in the loop and keep getting the notes, you know, drop your email into the chat, and we can add you to the Resilient Helena mailing list, or if you want, or just go to the website and sign up.
I'm not certain my chat posted, but anyway, I made several comments. Did anybody see any?
I didn't see him, Jim, no.
Technology is one of my shortcomings. So Diane, I would like to visit with you more about the mentor program.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. It's an interesting discussion.
Thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm curious to see where it goes, or where we take it.
Can Mike